reason, I am very excited to welcome our special guest for today. This is always fun for me personally, but I think you guys will enjoy it as well. We have on the phone with us David Crooks, Senior Vice President at World Travel Holdings. Hello, David.
Hi, Justin. Hello, everyone.
Cool. Thank you, David, so much for joining us today and taking time out of your schedule. We really do appreciate it.
No problem at all. I'm glad to do this. I did a similar call for the direct-to-consumer agents, and we had some pretty good feedback. So as everyone knows, and I know you know, Justin, right now if you go to Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and Carnival and ask what destination they need the most focus and help with, it is Cuba. So we thought, also based upon the number of people that have signed up, it looks like there was a lot of interest in making sure we're all knowledgeable and up to date in how to sell that destination and the Norwegian product.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thanks again for doing this. So I've got some questions for you, David. Hope you're ready to go. And certainly, guys, if you have some questions that you want to throw into the question pod, more than happy to ask for those as well. But let's start, David, just talking about Cuba in general. So you got a chance to experience it personally, I think, very recently. There's a lot of intrigue and mystery about Cuba, and I'm sure some of it's real and some of it's just sort of developed over time through different media outlets. So I'm curious, what surprised you most as you sort of stepped foot off the cruise ship into Cuba? What were you surprised by the most?
That's an interesting question when you say what surprised you, because what I pretty much tell everyone is I really didn't have any surprises, because I just always pictured Cuba, and I always wanted to go. I just want to experience it because it's a new destination, to be what it is. It was, and I'm going to be very honest, and I've heard this from others, you don't arrive and get off the ship and say, wow, isn't this beautiful? It's tired. There is a great amount of poverty. It's underdeveloped, which a lot of people like. A lot of people say you should go now before it becomes overly commercialized. I just can't imagine that happening. If that's a long way from that. It's very rustic. We had a guide, and I said to the guide, "Oh, geez, looks like you guys got a lot of damage from the fall hurricanes." And she said, "Nope, this is how we look all the time." So, I guess that's kind of what I expected. One of the surprises I had was, you do hear quite often how beautiful the beaches are, and I know people that have vacationed in Cuba, not on a cruise ship, and they come back and rave about the experience and how beautiful the beaches and the hotels and the food are. But you are not. We spent a full day there touring the whole island, and we didn't really see any beaches because they're quite a distance from the port.
Gotcha. So
that was a bit of a surprise, I guess. I expected to get off the ship like you do in many other Caribbean islands and see these beautiful beaches. Really, because of the size of the island and the amount of time you have there, all we really saw was Havana, and it's so large you could spend a full day just sightseeing that area.
So speaking of that, now, did you take a shore excursion through the cruise line? Did you take it through somebody else? How did that work on when you...
So what happened was back in April, Norwegian, because they really want to make sure that, because they have the most amount of capacity there over anybody else, and either with the two ships, the Sun and the Sky, and they wanted, and they need additional focus on the destination. They invited about 5 of us from the trade side to experience not only the Sky but the island, and so they set up everything. So just the backdrop was they took a few of us just so we could experience the product in the island, and we did the classic car experience, which I think, and I sent you some pictures, Dustin. When people think of Cuba, they picture those old beautiful classic cars, those convertibles, and that's the tour we did. So the drivers don't speak English, so when you're in the car, you pretty much are just looking around. But then they had one guide at each place we stopped who would talk a little bit about the destination that we arrived at. So that's just one thing people should know. And the other thing is it was so hot, and this was early April, so just another tidbit for when booking clients, and most people do take advantage of the classic car experience. They are convertibles, and you are spending a day sitting in a convertible in the hot sun. So a lot of people I was with were really sorry they did not have hats. It's not easy to buy things in Cuba, and some people didn't even have suntan lotion. So definitely, it's so hot and humid there. And again, it was early April. It was really hot, and the sun was strong. So anyone that's booking that experience should definitely make sure that they have sun protection.
That's a great suggestion, and yeah, we had Don Warner has done this as well. And so the classic cars are great, but be aware there are 0 emission standards. So
that was the other thing. I thought it was just our car. It was. Yeah.
There you go. I think that says it all.
Okay.
Very good. So it sounds like, though, I mean, obviously an incredible excursion. We all know when we think of Havana, we think of those classic cars. So it sounds like that would be, a great excursion for a lot of folks. So how did the visa program work? I know each cruise line handles it differently. Do you recall with Norwegian handled it? Did you purchase it in advance? Can you purchase it on the ship? How stringent were they when it came to that?
Yeah, they took care of, like I said, everything. I purchased it through them. I think it was $75. They did it. They made it easy. One of the things that surprised me, I did not know, and I think this is a helpful tip too to prepare clients, is when you get off the ship, you have to go through immigration to present the visa, which it was only 2 or 3 individuals checking them, and the lines were extraordinary, which I did not expect. So I think if people knew that in advance, obviously most people are on a tour and they have to get off at a certain time, or they probably want to get off later in the day, because there was, which I did not know, and I was surprised because you're not used to it. But when you get off the ship, you have to. At least with Norwegian, there was only a couple of booths available to check them. The line moved kind of fast, but that surprised.
All right. Excellent. These are great, I'm sure, great tidbits, and certainly something that the agents can share with our clients is to help prepare them.
And they admitted it's not pleasant, and that's just the way the island is. But I think if the clients know in advance to expect that, and then what happens is, in the terminal afterwards, I think most everyone probably knows this by now, but the island does not take U.S. dollars. They don't take credit cards. You can't get any of the local currency in advance. So they use the CUC, which is I think it's called the Cuban convertible peso. You can only get them, like a lot of times you go to Europe, like I'll get euros in advance. And actually I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So then after you go through, I guess I want to call it immigration, you have to now change your money if you plan on spending anything. And that I did not know. And it was a little hectic because you have this long line, you got to clear immigration, then you have to convert your money, which I didn't know, and you don't know how much. So you get to and I'm like, I don't know how much anything is in Cuba, and you don't want to come back with the currency because it's not accepted anywhere else. So nobody really, so the line gets long because nobody knows how much to convert. So I guess my helpful tip would be the only thing that really anyone buys there, other than food, if you're going to eat on the island, is cigars, and a good box of cigars was about $80 to $100. So, and that gets you, I think, 12. So, and that was the only thing I was going to buy. So, I guess I would recommend if people are going to buy cigars, they should probably at least convert about $100 US. But even though they will tell you credit cards and cash and euros are not accepted, I think there are some places that may, but in general, you do need to only use the local currency, and you need to exchange your money when you arrive. And there's another line that you have to get into before you even leave the terminal.
Okay, and that was actually a question that just came in. If you converted too much, can you exchange it back to US dollars before you leave?
That's a good question. I think they told us no, because they made it very clear, don't, and I came back with some, which I didn't mind, it was kind of like a souvenir, give it to my daughter, whatever. But, I didn't have enough. I had to borrow from Camille, but, I'd say for most people, $100. There's not much to buy there. But a good box of cigars was anywhere from $80 to $100. We went out to lunch at this phenomenal restaurant, which I would highly recommend. If anyone has a pen, they might want to write it down. It was called L.A. Lagarita. So L.A. capital G U-A-R-I-D-A. So obviously Norwegian, because of the amount of capacity they have there, they know places to go. It was just actually one of the best restaurants I've been to in a long time. So that's another place where you probably need to have cash if you wanted to have lunch on the island.
Okay, cool. So I'm getting a lot of great feedback from agents who have experienced Cuba and are providing some of their tips as they go along. So I'm trying to send those off into the chat pod so you guys can read some of the great tips. It does look like multiple people confirmed it is possible to exchange it back to U.S., which is good. So that's always, I'm sure, one of those dilemmas that we all go through. Can you spell the name of that restaurant again? Was it just L.A. like for Los Angeles?
Capital L.A. Like almost like LaGuardia Airport, but it's L.A. and then capital G U-A-R-I-D-A.
Oh, okay, totally different. All right, perfect. All right. So I don't know if, so there's a question has come up about sort of the conflicting information out there about whether or not with a visa you can just walk off the ship or if you have to take one of the cruise line shore excursions. Did you get any sense of while you were on the ship of sort of what the message was once you were on the ship?
That's a great question, and I'm so confused. Even about the currency, like they said, when you get there, you can't use credit cards, and then we're at some place and we're taking credit cards. It's the same type of thing as they tell you you really can't. Okay, you need to be part of a authorized excursion, but I think it's loosely enforced because even with us, we were part of an organized excursion, but I could have left at any time and just walked back to the ship, which actually is what I did. So you certainly can.
Yeah, and I think that's the bottom line. You're gonna, and to everyone who sort of feels like there's some confusion, there's most definitely sort of the official policy that follows the letter of the law, and certainly something that when you're speaking to clients, we want to make sure that we're explaining to them what they will hear and see and read, and then the reality of once you're in Cuba, obviously the whatever the United States government restrictions are, the Cuban government isn't enforcing those, and so I think you'll hear the real life stories of a lot more flexibility once you're there. But I don't think if you ever reached out to a cruise line or even if you went to our website and looked at what those policies are, they're going to be, make it seem like it's much more stringent.
Yeah, so I can understand why there's confusion. I was confused as well, and I think that is the bottom line. You're told you cannot, and that's the right thing to do, but people certainly did, and I did as well.
So there is the, I know that's certainly one of the hottest topics with regards to Cuba and the visa. All right, so let's move away from sort of the logistics of that, and I want to talk through sort of the cruise line itself for a second, because I know that that's a, Norwegian certainly has probably the biggest market share when it comes to Cuba, and with having multiple ships there now. So which ship were you on again, David?
I went on the Sky, and that was a very pleasant surprise. I think because prior to going on the Sky, knowing that they have the open bar, I was actually kind of afraid. You're like, okay, what am I going to experience on board? And all of us, and these are all industry veterans, were incredibly pleased and really happily surprised to see it was not a quote-unquote booze cruise. I think maybe on the weekends or the 3 nights that may be the case. That everyone on board, it was obvious they were not there to experience open bar on a ship. They were there to see Cuba. So it was, I always say, to me, the best experiences on a cruise is less about the hardware. It's about the people I'm cruising with, the people on board, the service, the food, and it was a great crowd. It was, you would not know it was open bar. It was an educated, upscale crowd. You know, it's not inexpensive to do the cruise to Cuba. So it was a middle-aged, lots of families, lots of groups, and it was people there to experience that island. And so I think I've seen more people inebriated on regular cruises than I did on this. So that was a nice surprise. The other thing that I really liked about the open bar concept was I thought there'd be these lines at the bar all the time, and there weren't any. And the reason being is you don't have to pay for anything. So like typically on a cruise, you got to get your key card out, and you got to sign something, you got to tip. There was never any line. You just walk out, get a drink. And the other thing that I was surprised, it's top shelf liquor. I thought for some reason, like what MSC is doing with their open bars, it being, just a low price liquor, but you could get, it was a lot of top shelf.
Wow. Okay.
And, the ship is old. It's dated. But so are all the ships that go to Cuba, whether it's the Majesty of the Seas, the Empress, the Paradise. They do have more balconies in there. The ship that goes there, which is definitely a sell feature. But the ship was well kept. It was clean. The service and the food was great. And again, it's just a 4-night cruise. Most people weren't there. It seemed to experience the product as much as they wanted to experience the destination. What I liked about it, too, is we spent a day in Great Stirrup Cay, I went there years ago and was not very impressed. The island was gorgeous. I sent you some pictures, Dustin. But
there it is, putting them up there now.
The island, they've spent millions and millions and millions in bringing in sand and developing the beaches and widening the island. And it was a nice mix, so one day you've got this quiet day, Great Stirrup Cay, and then the next day we're up at 5 in the morning. Ship docks at 7. And it was a busy, hectic, crazy day. So, but I kind of like that mix. Quiet day at Great Stirrup Cay, and then a busy day in Havana. The other thing I learned I didn't know, but I guess almost like 50% of the sailings don't make Great Stirrup Cay because the waters are rough. So I think if people knew that in advance, there wouldn't be as much disappointment.
That's a great little tip. I didn't realize. I knew that there were some issues with that. Could be some issues with that getting in there and tendering, but
it sounds like it happens quite a bit.
Perfect. Okay, good to know. These are great insider tips. So I've got a couple pictures on the screen of Great Stirrup Cay. It looks pretty darn amazing, and certainly someplace that I would rather be right now. So let's see here. So that's. I think you said some really great things about Norwegian, and obviously I know personally I was curious about. I picture open bar. I'm thinking huge lines to get drinks. So I'm glad to hear that that's not the case, and certainly the Sky has been around for a while, but it sounds like it's incredibly well kept up, and that's a huge plus.
I'm looking at some of the questions, and they're really good, especially because I've been there. And someone I just noticed they have a good point. I did the same. I've got to mention this back about the currency, and actually, their driver did speak English, so that's great. And they mentioned they get off early to avoid the long lines. We did the same. But another great tip that this person mentioned was, and I did it as well. I got euros before I left because it's a better exchange rate once you get to Cuba, and I don't think it's huge, and it all depends about it has to do with currency fluctuations, but if I think it's a great tip for your client. Someone else mentioned it. Instead of changing U.S. dollars when you get to Cuba, exchange euros. So get the euros in advance and then change it over to the Cuban currency when you're there. That's a great tip.
Great. Yeah, we got a lot of folks in here who are sharing some really great stuff. Jackie asked, can we just repeat, because it was a little bit of a high number, what you sort of think the percentage of times that ships can't dock at or can't get into great scale?
Yeah, I don't have an official number, but it felt like it could have been up to 50%. And I don't know why, but it seemed like they said a lot of the 3 nights don't make it. I don't know why. I don't know why. And I think it happens more in the winter than the summer months. It's not unusual. Royal Caribbean's private island is like right next door. They almost touch each other. Coco Cay, and they said Coco Cay, and I've heard the same thing happens there. The water that surrounds them, and they don't have docks, so and it could be a beautiful day, but the water, if it's too rough, they just don't allow the tendering.
Cool. All right, so Lorraine loves this picture of the cruise into history. So she also asked, how can I get a copy of it? If you want this PowerPoint slide with this image, which is beautiful, just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to send it over to anyone who would like to use it. When I first saw this shot, I thought it was a shot of San Juan.
I know, it looks like it.
But then I realized that was not the case.
Yeah, and then Dustin, as you know, if you go to the next 4 pages, it has the new revised itineraries that Norwegian just announced on the Sun and the Sky.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
They're
making some changes.
And there's a couple of 7 nights on the Sun. And as you guys, most everyone probably knows, the Sky's from Miami, doing 4 or 5 night rotations, and then the Sun is out of Port Canaveral doing 3 and 4. The cruise I went on did not overnight in Havana. Most do. We did not. We had a day in Key West. So we had a day in Key West, a day in Great Stirrup Key, and then a day in Havana. We did not overnight.
Good to know. So looks like some great options here, both out of Orlando or Port Canaveral and also down here in Miami. So last question, sort of, we talked obviously a lot about Norwegian, and you mentioned some other ships that you're, or other cruise lines that are doing it. Can you give us or did you see any other ships in port when you were there, and can you give us sort of a quick recap of what other sort of cruise lines are really going all in Cuba?
No, so the issue with Havana is the port's really small, and it hasn't been dredged, so they only allow very small ships, and part of that's just government requirements. So we were the only ship there. One of the pictures I sent you was a picture we took from the fort of the ship in town. We did not see any others, but basically Norwegian has the Sky out of Miami, the Sun out of Port Canaveral, and then Norwegian has the Majesty of the Seas and the Empress of the Seas, again, 2 of their oldest ships, and then Carnival has the Paradise out of Tampa. And then, then the luxury lines go there sporadically as well, like Azamara and the others. But, of the 3 mass market lines, it's Royal with their 2 ships, Carnival right now with the Paradise, and then the 2 Norwegian ships. And, and the Empress, the Majesty, and the Paradise, they don't have a lot of balconies. The Sky and the Sun does. That's one advantage Norwegian has. They just have a lot more ships with the balconies.
That's great. Excellent, excellent. So I've tried to put through all the comments that have been coming in, and lots of great advice. It seems what I love about this destination is how much excitement it generates. There's a ton of buzz. It's had the buzz before they started going, and I'm frankly a little surprised, but it's great to see that buzz continues. It's not something that is going away at all. It seems like the interest is only increasing. So
another comment I saw, which I forgot to mention, is shopping. And this person is correct. We do the same. It's like a flea market. And you not too far, about a mile from the ship, and they have a lot of vendors and stuff. But what we liked, they were making like homemade pina coladas there. You can pick the pineapple and all of that, and that was pretty interesting to see as well.
Cool.
And that's an example of, we just walked there on our own. So, we just kind of left the tour, and a bunch of us just walked over, and then we just walked all around.
Great. So Teal asked, and this, I don't know if you obviously wouldn't have personal experience with this, but I'm sure someone else could chime in if they know. How does the overnight work? Is there a curfew? Could you theoretically stay out, overnight, I guess, if you wanted to? I'm assuming on the overnights that doesn't really matter once you're off the ship, is my guess.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there is. I know most people go to the Cuba Commentary show which I understand is pretty good. It's long, but I haven't heard that there's a curfew. I know one of the problems was up until the schedule change, Norwegian was leaving like at 6 in the morning anyway, but now they've extended it because with their new itineraries.
Okay. Do you happen to know, do the vendors barter? Will they negotiate? Did you have a chance to experience that?
Yes, they definitely did. I bought like these little, they call them magic boxes, and yeah, it was definitely easy to barter. The other thing that there's confusion around is, are you allowed to bring in gifts for the residents? I always thought you were not allowed. There were several people that were handing out toothbrushes to the kids and toiletries and toys, which I thought was great. But I always thought you were not allowed. And that was just another, I think you're told you cannot unless it goes through a proper organization, but there were plenty of people that were doing it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so and the reason I thought of that, there were people, I felt guilty bartering. There's a lot of poverty. It's very safe, from what I understand, too. It's not, you feel like it may not be safe. It's a very safe island. But, because of the amount of poverty, I felt like I needed to pay more for the things I was taking or buying because, these people definitely seem to be struggling. And again, matter of fact, people were giving them money and gifts that they had brought with them.
That's cool. All right. Dave, I won't take any more of your time. We filled an entire half hour of information, and I know that you guys, those of you that are sharing all of your tips as well, I hope everyone's collecting those because they are, there's some really good information out here. And obviously, it looks like to me, every person who has visited Cuba is absolutely raving about it as just an incredibly unique experience, and I think certainly most people would put on their bucket list and are anxious to try themselves. So sounds like
I do hear people that vacation there seem to have a much different and maybe a more rewarding experience. Not that this was rewarding, but just I also hear it's just very different to get out into the beaches on the other side of the island and just spend time and really explore. It's because of the amount of time there, you kind of, especially maybe because we were only there for the day, just really felt limited to Havana.
Just a quick little taste. All right. Well, on that note, thank you, David, again for joining today. We're going to continue the call. I have some exciting other news, not related to Cuba and NCL to share. But again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this. We really appreciate it.
No problem. And as always, if anybody has any questions about this or anything, they can call me. My direct line is 617-587-6493 or email me.
Cool. dcrooks@wth.com, is that?
Yep.
All right. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much again.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
Very good. Bye-bye.